films. On the day of my older sister's wedding, her fiancé ran away with his ex-girlfriend without saying a word. All he left behind was a letter. The night before, we were having a peaceful family dinner. She seemed really nervous about her wedding the next day. Our dad joked around, trying to help get the edge off.
Don't get nervous and drop the knife when you cut the cake.
And our mom was balancing the act. Oh, stop it now. You're gonna jinx her. Oh, geez. My sister laughed gently. She appreciated the humor. I watched my family go back and forth, filled with a sense of happiness. My sister had been working hard to look her best in the wedding dress and successfully achieved her goal. I told her how good she looked, and she smiled back with an embarrassed look on her face. Thanks. I knew how hard she had been preparing for the big day, and it was nice to see her so happy. That night went by, and finally, it was the big day when my parents got a call from my sister's fiancé's father.
Jack ran away with his ex-girlfriend and we can't find him.
Everyone was confused and blanked out for a moment. He hurried over to my parents' house, where my parents were told about the details. I couldn't believe my parents at first. I thought it was a big joke, or that the groom had severe marriage blues or something. My mind was racing with all kinds of thoughts. If it was so hard for me to think straight, I can't even imagine how hard it must have been for my sister. According to Jack's father, they were having a family dinner the night before as well. But Jack seemed off. He seemed out of it, and his responses seemed empty, like he wasn't even listening to the conversation. They cut the dinner short because it became too awkward. And Jack just hurried back to his room, saying,
I've got an early day tomorrow.
The next day, Jack wouldn't come down at all, so they got concerned and went to get him. When they noticed that his room was empty, there was just a letter that said, I'm leaving to be with Jill, who was his ex-girlfriend. My sister read the note and broke down into tears as Jack's parents and younger brother got on their knees and apologized. My parents stood there, speechless. When I finally started processing the situation, I could feel my blood draining from my face, and my body was covered with cold sweat. I started shaking, wondering what was going to happen after this. It all happened on the day of the wedding, so naturally, the guests were panicked as well. I knew that my sister would be judged for what happened, and that she would have to bear all of that burden all on her own. There was nothing I could do. The wedding that was supposed to start in a few hours just got called off, and all members from both families were rushed to notify every guest. After a while, the financial damage was confirmed, and Jack's parents covered it. Shortly after, they both passed away. I'm sure all of the stress from the incident played a big part in that. Jack's younger brother, Tom, was left to fend for himself, so he quit college and started working. My sister was so happy for him when he was accepted into medical school because she knew how hard he had been studying to become a doctor. It made me realize how the actions of one selfish person could horribly affect so many people. After everything that happened, my sister was traumatized. My sister, who seemed so happy that day, was nowhere to be found, and she couldn't leave the house for a while after that. It made me angry that he waited until the worst time possible to leave my sister. He could have saved so many people from so much heartbreak. He just disappeared, leaving everyone to deal with a disastrous situation. 5 years passed. I was now married and moved far away with my husband for work. This move set off a chain of unexpected events. After a while, I was in the city when I thought I saw a guy who looked just like the man who wrecked my sister's life. It had been 5 years, but I will never forget that man's face. I couldn't believe it, but I had to be sure, so I investigated it thoroughly, and sure enough, it was Jack and his ex-girlfriend, and they lived right near me. From the looks of their house, They seemed to be living a comfortable life. He had ruined my sister's life, his own parents' lives, and his own brother's life. And here he was, living a seemingly happy life. Just the thought of that was unforgivable. I was boiling with anger and felt an urge to act on it immediately, but I managed to calm myself down. The first thing I did was write an anonymous letter to Jack's brother, telling him Jack's new address. A couple weeks later, I saw a familiar car parked in front of Jack's house. It was his brother. He had finally showed up. I could hear them yelling at each other from outside. Jack's brother was also one of the victims, whose life was destroyed after that incident. After a while, I saw Jack get dragged out of the house and carried away in his brother's car. Shortly after, the house was for sale. I heard from a friend later that Jack had been dragged back home. My mother told me that he was being charged for all of the financial damages caused by him that day. Thankfully, Jack and his wife didn't have a child yet, so no one who didn't deserve it was hurt. Jack's brother had been working full-time and part-time to pay off his parents' debt that Jack had caused. But Jack's brother was a very capable guy and started up his own online business and successfully paid off all of the debt in no time. Regardless, his resentment towards Jack was immense. He was the cause of their parents' death and the surrendering of his dream to become a doctor. After all, he was now hell-bent on getting his revenge, and Jack and his wife had nowhere to run. They are being extracted of every last cent they make. The couple's debt had grown to over a few $1 million. The wedding fees, transportation fees, honeymoon, and payment for the house that they bought in advance. And on top of that, Jack's ex-girlfriend was also engaged, so they had to pay him alimony and compensation for other expenses as well. There was a reason why I didn't confront them immediately when I saw them and tipped Jack's brother off instead. It was because after the incident, while the couple were selfishly enjoying their life, I had watched my sister and Jack's brother go through an excruciating amount of pain. Jack's brother paid my sister extra money besides the alimony because she had already quit her job because she was planning on getting married. My sister refused because she knew that he was paying off his parents' debt, but he transferred the money directly into her bank account anyways. On top of everything, it was right after he had become a third year in medical school, so he had to pay tuition as well. Basically, Jack's affair had destroyed everyone's life around him. In the end, it ruined his own life, but I have no sympathy for him. Screw him. 15 years since the incident, my sister finally got married. My sister was 40 years old now. "I'm too old for wedding dresses," she said, and so we just decided to have a small family gathering instead. Regardless, we were all happy for her from the bottom of our hearts. She had been against the idea of marriage for a long time after that incident. That's when she met her husband, who understood her feelings.
I'll be here for you until you feel ready.
He had waited for her to come around. "I feel bad for your boyfriend. He's been waiting for so long. Don't you think he deserves an answer soon?" My mother got restless and concerned, so she gave my sister a little nudge, and she finally decided to get married. It was already 10 years since the first proposal. My sister is finally living a happy life with her nice husband. Because of the incident, my sister was traumatized, and it took a long time for her to get over the idea of getting married. I was so happy for her. My sister said that she had given up on a baby because she was already 40 years old. It gave me mixed feelings because she should have been married with children by now. The thought that the incident stole her chance to get pregnant made me cry. But 3 months later, I was pleasantly surprised when my sister called to tell me that she had gotten pregnant. She seemed nervous about her age, but when I reminded her that it wasn't that unusual these days, she smiled and nodded. She's due in 7 months, and I can tell already that I'm going to spoil that kid.
How was today's video? If you enjoyed it, please subscribe, like, and leave a comment. Stay tuned for more.